What is going on, Snooker fans? Hope you're all keeping well. It's been a little while since my last video, as there's been a lot going on for me over the past few weeks. But in that time that I've been away, there has been a lot happening in the snooker world as well. So before I go ahead and review last week's tournament in Hong Kong, I will briefly touch upon what else I've missed over the past couple of weeks. And unfortunately, we do have to start with the news that broke last week of John Virgo's really sad passing, which was just utterly heartbreaking. There's no other words for it. You know, I have a weird feeling when a celebrity you look up to passes away. Maybe some of you had the privilege of meeting him, but for most of us, like me, John was someone we knew only through our TV screens. So this sense of grief that you have for someone you never once interacted with is such a strange one. But John will have had such an impact on pretty much everyone's lives involved with snooker, whether that's players, whether that's pundits, and most importantly, us fans. And, you know, whether that was him being a player, whether that was him as a commentator or both, he really was a massive part of our sport. And Tom from Bay's Breakdown made a tribute video last week, which summarised the feelings a lot better than I'll probably be able to. But the news really did sort of hit me for six last week. And I think the reason for that is, you know, I've been watching snooker for some 20 years now. And if the first memory I have of the sport, well, the earliest memory that is that infamous match between Ebden and O'Sullivan in 2005. And JV was commentating on that match as well.
Cue ball cleaned again. Ronnie sat there suffering. It's taken over 5 minutes for this break of 12 by Peter.
5 minutes and 20 seconds. We keep saying it. Ronnie made that maximum here in 1997.
There you go. We're just past that 5 minute 20 seconds and the break's 12.
So literally the entire time I've spent as a fan growing up watching the sport, he has been a constant voice. And well, let's be honest, he was the modern day voice of snooker. Others of you a little older than me will remember him as a player as well. But we are also talking about a player who won a UK title. But I can only talk about him as a commentator. And you know, we have great commentators in our sport, the likes of Hendry, Alan McManus, Neil Foles, just to name a few. And they are all fantastic at sort of giving us an insight into what is happening, whether that's technical, whether that's mental. John wasn't so much in that mould, but he was unmatched in his ability to create atmosphere, to create drama, just through his pure passion for the sport. I think it was Phil Hay who a little while ago said that the best word or the best way to describe Virgo was his cadence, which is just completely true. Hendry even done a short interview last week where he said John was the man who could turn even the most mundane of matches into an entertaining one, which again are words that I completely echo. And with respect to other commentators, no one is able to come close to him in that regard. If I think back to some of the most iconic snooker matches, he is there in comms, just elevating that moment even more. So yeah, the World Championship is going to be a strange one this year. But what I do hope is that by then we might be in a position to really celebrate him, because right now I think we are all feeling the same way, where the news has felt just like a massive, surprising gut punch. But maybe in a couple of months we will be able to really tribute everything he has done in the game, because he truly was nothing short of an icon of snooker. But to the action that was on the bays, we had the German Masters a couple of weeks ago, which is normally a tournament that is pretty high up on my list of priorities in a snooker season. But just due to work commitments, I just didn't have that much time to watch it, so I can't go too in depth about what actually happened during the week. But it was a good tournament for the likes of Ali Carter, Shaun Murphy and Neil Robertson, who all made it to at least the semi-final. But it was Judd Trump who finally ended his 13-month wait for a title by winning a title that he's won 4 times in the past 7 years now. And he also only dropped 11 frames across the entire tournament. The closest someone could get to him was Zhao in the quarterfinals. But apart from that, it was a pretty comfortable week for Judd. And he even coasted past Shaun Murphy in the final, who himself had eased past the likes of Mark Allen, Kyle Wilson and Neil Robertson in getting to the final. And I do wonder what this means for Judd's chances at the World Championship. Now, the reason I say this is because we've become so used to Judd being the dominant force in snooker, and he usually hits the ground running right from the start of a season, winning titles during the first 2/3 of a season. But then there is often a drop-off come sort of March time. Whether that's burnout, who knows, but he does typically take a dip in the last few tournaments of a season. So, has he managed to reverse that this time around? Of course, he wouldn't have planned to go so long without a title, but is it reasonable to suggest that he has saved his best form for the back end of the season this time? His cue issues seem to now be a thing of the past. He'll have the confidence that comes from winning a tournament, and that is coupled with the fact that he has already been playing pretty well, and he himself doesn't think he's that far away from his best. Now, the World Championship is going to be a minefield, with a lot of people already looking at the likes of Selby and Wilson's chances, but make no mistake about it, Judd is going to be right in the mixer as well. And then finally to last week's action from Hong Kong at the World Grand Prix, a tournament that I did manage to keep a better eye on. Now, the news of John Virgo, which happened midway through the tournament, did somewhat distract me away from the snooker that was happening, but it was a historic week. The tournament started with 10 Chinese players in a field of 32, 9 of whom made it through to the last 16. And there is a slight irony, I suppose, that the one man who didn't was the man who started this revolution to begin with, Ding Zhonghui. And the flag bearer is starting to become increasingly overshadowed by his compatriots now, which, look, I'm sure he does feel an immense sense of pride for, but unless he starts to turn things around soon, it does feel as though he is in the process of being replaced, if he hasn't been already. And then of those remaining players, 4 made it to the semi-finals, meaning for the first time in history, the semi-final of a snooker event was contested by only Chinese players. And this has been coming. We've had multiple semi-finals recently where 3 of the semi-finalists were Chinese. And like I've said on multiple occasions, the Chinese takeover of the sport isn't a thing of the future anymore. It is happening right now. And with the grassroots infrastructure that they have there compared to what we have here in the UK, that is a pattern that will only continue over the next 10, 15 or even more years. Now, a slightly cynical view may be to suggest that the poor scheduling of the season, and we have to say this, it is poor, by having this tournament in Hong Kong start a day after a tournament in Germany finishes, played a large part in the likes of Judd Trump, Shaun Murphy, Kyren Wilson, Neil Robertson and Mark Selby all going out early. But on the flip side, Zhao got to the quarterfinals in Germany and then still managed to reach the semi-finals last week, which does rather go in the face of those complaints. And speaking of Zhao, his season is continuing to be a very impressive one, off the back of a very impressive one last season as well. This was the 5th time this season that he has reached at least a quarter-final, and he has no fear of beating pretty much anyone, highlighted by beating both Kyren Wilson and Ronnie O'Sullivan last week. In the same mould as someone like Stuart Bingham and Barry Hawkins, he is very much someone who has only gotten better once winning his first title later in his career. And we can't just consider him as a banana skin anymore. He is very much a dark horse in any tournament that he plays in now. Zhang Anda had been stuck in the wilderness for a while since that breakthrough season he had a couple of years ago, but after making a couple of quarterfinals already this season, his run to the final in Hong Kong may signal a rediscovery of some confidence in his game. He did of course drop out of the top 16 when all of his money from 2 years ago came off, but he hasn't plummeted down the rankings, and with the money from last week, he is hovering just outside the top 16 at number 20 in the world, so is by no means out of the running for a crucible ceiling if he can string a couple more big tournaments together. Last week also represented another near miss for Zhao Yulong, and it is starting to feel a bit like how we talked about Jack Lazowski when it comes to Yulong. He was great last week, particularly in beating an in-form Ali Carter, but that was a painful final frame decider he lost against Zhang in the semis, and it was, in fairness, a fantastic match. But Zhao dominated that deciding frame without being able to kill it off, and then sort of went in off, fairly unfortunately, on the final blue, allowing Zhang to come in and clear. He is getting closer though, and to repeat the cliche used with Lazowski, if he keeps putting himself into these positions on a regular enough basis, then at some point you expect him to find a way over the line. But in a week dominated by China, it was their reigning world champion who made it through the draw to be the last man standing and claim his first ranking title of the season. And this, I think, is what we've been expecting from Xintong all season, just waiting for him to have a tournament where he really catches fire, just like he done at the Crucible, and this was it. Okay, he has won a small event out in Saudi earlier this season, but this was a far more impressive week. His comeback against Selby was superb because Mark was looking very, very good to go 4-1 ahead, and then only scored 11 points in the next 4 frames to see Xintong come back at him, making a couple of century breaks along the way. And centuries were the theme for Zhao, making 9 across the entire tournament, including 5 in that final. And this is what makes him such a special player. Does he have an ounce of safety play in him? Absolutely not. But it is a bit like having a reincarnated Stephen Hendry the way he plays the game. Ultra attacking, only having one thought in his head, which is just to attack. And sometimes he can be guilty of going too attacking. But when he knocks them in, he is such a good player to watch. Someone who makes the sport look ridiculously easy. He joins Mark Selby and Kyron Wilson as the only men to win multiple titles this season. However, when it comes to ranking events, the pattern continues of having a brand new winner every single time. It is now 13 ranking tournaments played and 13 different winners of them. And we still have players like Hawkins, Ding, O'Sullivan and Higgins yet to pick up titles, so that pattern could well continue. The next tournament is the Players' Championship, so this was the final chance players had to get themselves into the top 16 on the one-year list, which is now locked in. So these are the men we'll be seeing in Telford starting from next Tuesday. But to finish this video, and going back to John Virgo, I will leave you with one of my favourite moments from the voice of snooker.
Somehow he's got to fluke the yellow.
18-9.
You never know. You never know. There's 6 pockets on the table. There's 6 pockets on the table. There's 6 of them, you know. And he's on the green.
91. 94.
Well, I've seen it all now, Steve.
98.
And there's 2 equal. Stephen Henry's all-time record of centuries. Yeah!